So at the beginning, I have a material and I have a set of masks. So if we have a look at the masks, what I've got here is typical 3-channel packed system. So I have my red channel, which is kind of this flame cut out. I have a green channel, which is a mask, and I have a blue channel, which is just a more complicated mask. It's got more variation in it. And then what I have done is I have created myself a material shader for the fire. So for the actual particle system, each particle will effectively get this shader. And this breaks down into, first of all, we're going to take the particle color, we're going to make it, amplify it by multiplying it by 20, and we pump that into the emissive. Then I basically have a set of masks which I multiply together. One of the masks is the texture I've just shown you, and that basically gives us the outline. If I preview this, you'll see that we will actually get the red channel. Let's actually preview this, but disconnect that. So we get this cut out. And then on the other side, we have, right, okay, I need to set this to 1. There we go. So on the other side, we have a couple of textures. One, again, which is a very simple mask. So this time we're using the blue channel. And then we've just got basically a panning texture to give it some variation. And then we are effectively just multiplying those two together, and that just cuts out. So we have something that's a little bit more organically flame-like. Okay, so that's the construction of the material. So now we want to make a Niagara system. So we're going to go to Effects, and we're going to create a Niagara emitter. And then we will turn it into a system afterwards. So we are going to use a new emitter from a template, and we're going to just select an empty emitter. And I'm going to call this fire underscore NE, and NE stands for Niagara emitter. So I'm going to double click on the emitter, and I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to dock the tab so that it's full screen. And as we can see, to begin with, we have nothing. The first thing I need to do is spawn some particles. So I'm going to go to emitter update, and I'm going to click on this arrow, and then I'm going to search for spawn. And as you can see here is spawn rate. So I'm going to set this to 50, and we have our particles. So rather than just appearing as a single dot, what we want is we want the particles to appear in an area or a volume. So under particle spawn, I'm going to click the plus button. I'm going to search for location, and I'm going to select cylindrical location. Then what I need to do is I need to set the height. So I'm going to adjust the height down to something relatively small. And this means that I'm spawning these particles into basically a circle. In order to get these particles to move up, I'm going to add a gravity force. So in the particle update, I'm going to search for gravity. And we get this warning. And this means that in order to calculate the gravity, we need to add another module. So I'm just going to click Fix Issue, and that will go away. So you can see this new module, Solve Forces and Velocity, has been added. So by default, the gravity setting will cause the particles to drop. And in this instance, what I actually want to happen is I want to change this so that it's a positive value, and then this will push the particles in the air. So the particles will go up. I'm just going to turn that down a bit, say maybe 100.
The next thing to do is to change the size of these particles. So I want them to be larger, so I need to scale the particles up. So I want to add a new module, so I'm going to search for size, and I want to scale sprite size. So I'm going to add that module. By default, this comes in as a constant value, and I don't want a constant value. What I want to do is I want to change the scale of the sprite over time. So if I click on this drop down arrow and I search for curve, it will come up with a list, and I want vector 2D from curve. I'm going to make this larger so that we can see what's going on. I can see that my particles have disappeared, so that means I need to make them bigger, and I would do that in the initialization. And I'm going to go to the sprite size, and then I'm going to set this to uniform, and then I'm just going to scale this up until I can actually see the sprites appearing. So we can see that the particles are spawning, and then they're getting smaller over time. Another problem that I can see is that these particles are lasting a very long time, and that's because their lifetime is 5 seconds. So I want to reduce the lifetime of these particles. So rather than just having every particle have the same lifetime, I'm going to use a random, and I'm going to change the random value to something like 0.5, so that's half a second, to about 3 seconds. So the random lifetime will not only give me variation in the lifetime of the particles, but also because of this scale curve, it will also give me randomness in terms of size. And now we can return to the curve that controls the sprite scale. And there's actually two curves here. There's one for the X and one for the Y. So if I select a point, I can move it around on the graph. So if I click and drag, I can move a point around. And if I shift click, then what will happen is that I can add a point into the graph. And initially what I want to do is I want the sprites to scale up vertically. So that's the Y axis. So I hope you can see that as I adjust this, that the particles here are scaling up, so they're stretching out along the Y axis. I'm just going to exaggerate this so that we can see clearly what's going on. Okay, I'm just going to put that back, and what I want these fire particles to do is I want them to kind of be quite big, scale up at the beginning, then I want them to scale down, and then just as they get towards the end, I want a kind of a little enlargement just before they pop out of existence. So just at the end here, I'm going to have them scale up like this. So it gets a little bit bigger just before it completely disappears. That should do it. And the other thing I want to do is scale the sprite down at the beginning. So when it initially appears, it's quite small and it gets very big quickly. And that's not quite the effect. So I think the other problem is that the particles aren't moving up quickly enough. So I can't see the effect of the scale well. So I'm going to go back to my gravity, and I'm going to increase this so that they rise quicker. That's what I'm looking for. So the next thing I need to do is I need to change the color of the particles. So I'm going to go to particle update. I'm going to search for color. I'm going to select color, and again we get this constant value, and we actually want to change this to a curve. So I'm going to color from curve. So this is our changing color over time. At the bottom here we have the transparency of the particle, and I want to move this along so that the particle remains opaque and then goes transparent right at the end. Another thing to note is because the material I'm going to use is an additive material, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the last color there to black. and that will make sure that it fades. Now I need to add some colours. So at the beginning I'm going to delay the white, and then I'm going to add a kind of darker reddish yellow colour. It should be about right. So then it's going to go to white, and then I'm going to go back to a more fire colour. So I'm looking at reference while I'm doing this as well, just to make sure that I'm getting the right colours. So towards the end we get a much deeper red, and then right towards this point it's going to get a little bit darker, and I'm going to give it a slightly orangey tinge. And just going to tweak that a little bit more. That's not quite what I want it a little bit redder, I think. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So, and we can see the color change over here in the display panel, so we can see what the colors are doing. The next step is to add a material. So if I click here on the emitter system, then I can select my material, click fire, and then I'm going to select my material, and now you can see here it is on the particle. Now I need to make some adjustments to the particle system. So I want to change the scale of the sprites. Now I don't want to do this inside the graph. I want to do this with the initial update of the particle, and that will control the overall size. So here's the uniform size, and I'm going to scale this up till I get something round about the effect I want. So I want to be able to see the actual flames. Let's apply this, and then I'm going to go back to the actual level. Now if I try and drag this in, you see it doesn't work. I've got a no entry sign. That's because I need to right click on this and create a Niagara system from the emitter. And if I drag and drop that now, you can see it's active in the editor. So I'm going to play this in the editor and check out, and that looks pretty good. If anything, it's a bit big, so I need to adjust that. I'm going to go back to the emitter. I'm going to look for the want to adjust the cylinder location, and at the moment the size is a bit large, so I'm going to turn this down to about 30, and I'm going to turn the height down as well. That should do that. Let's apply it and see what it looks like. Okay, that looks promising. Let's play and test. That looks pretty good. So there we have it. We have fire using a particle system.